Welcome to Hebrew Bible Insights, a podcast about making sense of the Hebrew Bible. I'm Matthew Delaney. I'm here with Dr. Nathan French, and today we are having an awesome conversation about Dr. Nathan French's unique experience. He got to do a master's degree in Israel, in Jerusalem. He spent 2 years there studying the Hebrew Bible, studying the ancient Near East. And I know many people listening, maybe you've been to Israel, and probably if you've been there, you wish you could go back, or if you haven't been there, you wish you could go. And today we're going to live vicariously through his experience. He's going to tell us, what was it like living there? What did he study? What was it like learning in Israel about the stories of ancient Israel and the stories of Scripture? This is going to be an absolute blast. We're excited to have you on today.
Yeah, well, thanks. I'm excited to be talking about this, so it's going to be good. So,
look, people can study almost any subject you want in Israel. Israel has some of the best universities in the world about a number of subjects. So before we dive in, why don't you tell us specifically, what did you study there for your master's degree?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I ended up doing a master's degree in, at the time, I believe it was called the Bible and Its World. But we convinced them that maybe we should change that to Hebrew Bible, the Ancient Near East, or the Bible and the Near East and the Ancient Near East, or something like that. So that is fully what it is. And the whole point of the degree is to study, obviously, the Hebrew Scriptures within its Ancient Near Eastern context. I mean, that's how they've set up the degree in Israel. And at least when I was there, I was there from 2009 to 2011. So it's been a good while since I've been there and since I completed my master's, but was at the Rothberg International School, which is connected to the Hebrew University, part of it. And essentially it's just that the Hebrew University professors will come over to Rothberg and all classes will be taught in English. And of course, this was their advanced Bible degree. So yeah, and there's a lot of flexibility in the degree. Students were able to really pick and choose what sort of emphasis they wanted to have for their degree, especially if they were thinking of moving forward in postgraduate studies. So the graduate degree really offered a lot of flexibility in how one would choose whether they wanted to emphasize, for example, on ancient languages, archaeology, the biblical text itself. You got a bit of all of that as part of the sort of main roadmap for the degree, but you could also sort of tailor it to your liking, depending on where you were going to go after that. So
I love when education has individualization. You can choose what things fit your passion, your interests. And they obviously have experts in all those areas. So
they do. And that's the wonderful thing. The other great thing about the Hebrew University is, of course, like you said, it's one of the top universities in the world. And so you have scholars, especially in Hebrew Bible and ancient Near Eastern studies, who are always coming through Jerusalem, always ready and willing probably to, I suppose, to take a sabbatical of some sort and teach at Hebrew U for that time. And of course, that was the case. There were professors coming through in their areas of expertise. For example, I believe Mark Smith, who I think is at Princeton now, he came through and was teaching Ugaritic one summer. And so you get these sorts of opportunities to work with all sorts of different scholars. So.
You know, one thing I wonder what it was like for you, because at least when I was in Israel, I felt this way, that the geography of the stories of the Bible came to life.
Yeah.
I've lived most of my life in Indiana and Oklahoma, very flat, no mountains, no hills even. And so going to Israel, getting to actually experience what it's like going from Tel Aviv and the beach and then making that climb all the way up to Jerusalem, the topography, it just, I don't know, it made everything three-dimensional for me. Whereas I feel like before, so many of these stories were 2D. Can you tell us, what was it like being in the Holy Land? As, you know, one of the courses you teach is the historical geography of the Holy Land now. How did getting to study in Israel for so long impact the way that you understand the geography?
Yeah, that's a great question. In one sense, it really gives you orientation, as you're saying. So you have a real orientation of what the land is and the topography and all aspects of the land. And it's such a diverse land. It's very important that those who have not been, they don't realize that there's all sorts of different parts of Israel and different topographies throughout. So you have the desert land, right? If you head down into the Negev and head east of Jerusalem and then head south, and it's just pretty much all desert, But then when you're in Jerusalem, you are up in the highlands. Even when you go outside Jerusalem, like if you go to Hebron, you really see that you are in sort of a mountainous area. So we're not talking about the Rockies here, but it still has very much that feel to it when you're in the Jerusalem area. Then like you said, when you go down into Tel Aviv, you're right on the coastal plain then, and then you head up north to Haifa, and you sort of hit the Carmel mountain ridge up there, and then to the Galilee. And I always say when you're in the Galilee region, you sort of feel like you're, I don't know, in the Midwest, right here in America. At least that's it's my context. So that's what I can compare it to. A lot of farmland, beautiful lake, right? The freshwater lake of the Kinneret of the Galilee there. And so being able to study there, especially for 2 years, it is true when you go on a tour, you do get this introduction and you do see the land in this way, and you have some orientation through your tours or if you've done it multiple times. But when you're actually living there, you become very intimate with the land, right? I mean, Israelis have this saying, right? To know the land, you have to walk it, right? You have to be on it and really become intimate with it. And I think that's true when you're studying there. At least it was for me to really get a good grounding of what we're talking about. So within the scriptures.
I think something people also don't realize is how relatively easy it is to walk the land of Israel.
Yeah.
Whenever people, sometimes I've had people visit the U.S. and or I've had friends who've known others who've never been to the U.S. before, and they come, let's say, to Tulsa, Oklahoma, where we're at, and then they'll just suggest, hey, do you want to go drive to New York for the weekend? And you're like, well, I mean, we could, but it's going to take us over 20 hours just to drive there one way and then come back. People don't realize how massive the U.S. is. They think of the big cities. Oh yeah, let's just drive around, and it's probably just like doing a Western Europe hop around the nations. It's like, no, that's not how it works here.
Yeah.
So with Israel, I mean, the distance between, let's say, you just take Tel Aviv and the coastal plain by the beach to Jerusalem in the mountains. That's like a 45-minute-ish drive.
Yeah, depending on traffic, right? It's not bad at all. So it's true. We don't realize how small the land is, the land of Israel itself. And you can get from one end to the other pretty quickly. And so this is important when you're reading the stories to know sort of how close things are. Of course, we're dealing with ancient times, so things are takes more time to get from one place to another, but nevertheless, the distance isn't that far at all. And of course, another great experience of just knowing the land of Israel is you then begin to understand Israel's neighbors, right, and where they are geographically, and that becomes very important both for modern Israel studies or modern Middle Eastern studies as much as for ancient Near Eastern studies. So, for example, on this note, I remember sitting in Ohad Cohen's class, and we were talking about, and I've said this I think before on this podcast. So the Akkadian Shadum would be mountains, and so the Stot Moab, the fields of Moab or the mountains of Moab. And I remember he just stopped and he said, well, where are the fields of Moab? And pointed out the window and says, they're over there, right? So he points towards the east, and there's the Jordanian mountains, right? And this is where this is where the family, Elimelech, Naomi, this is where they would have been going. And it changes how you read the text in that moment, right? Because you have words on a page that are being connected to something like mountains that were there all that time ago, right? So they haven't changed, they haven't moved, and so that becomes, I think, very important. And of course, we got a chance to during that time. I went to we didn't get to Cairo because I believe the riots broke out that year. That were happening, the different protests around the ancient Near East, around the Middle East during that time. So we didn't make it to Cairo, but we did make it to Dahab. So we were able to go down to the Sinai Peninsula and go to St. Catherine's and see Mount Sinai and all that. So that was wonderful. But you get a real feel then for the desert and the Sinai. You get a real feel for the Red Sea. Beautiful, lots of wonderful scuba diving right there along the coast in the Sinai. A lot, of course, right down there on the Red Sea as well in Israel. Such a beautiful area, and then you can go across to Aqaba in Jordan, and then head up to like Petra, for example. So these are experiences that you can have when you are studying at the Hebrew University. You can actually experience some of the Middle East as well, and really get a footing on an ancient Near Eastern level for Israel's neighbors and where all those locations are and what it's like. So
that's so cool. So cool.
Yeah, it is.
One more comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
One more comment on this topic, that when we hear about Jews who are immigrating into Israel, they're doing aliyah. And maybe people have heard that word before, but aliyah literally means ascent. And it's directly related to the word Allah. When you read in the Hebrew Bible, you hear about how the people of Israel are going to Allah, to Israel, to the promised land, into Canaan. But in the book of Numbers, they say, we do not want to Allah. We don't want to ascend. And when you think about Jerusalem, you think about when you go there, you're going to go up.
Yeah.
And so you see the verticality in the stories. In fact, the verb Allah is the last word in the book of 2nd Chronicles. Yeah. And, may he Allah, may he ascend. So this again goes into ideas of mountains and what they represent in the ancient Near East and relation to temples and the cosmology. So this we could go to a whole nother conversation here. But when you see that, you realize, this is why some of that verbiage is used. So no, you're absolutely right. Once you experience the land on that level, you realize. I mean, once you get off the plane in Tel Aviv and you take the Sheirut or the bus or the car or whatever you take up to Jerusalem, you're going up, right? I mean, you really are going up, and you know it. And so it definitely changes how you read the text. The Psalms of Ascent, for example, or like you were saying, in these various passages, it becomes very important. Then, of course, Mount Zion and the importance of mountains in the ancient Near East and what that means. You're right. We could have a whole nother conversation on that level. So I was just reading Ezekiel 36 with some people this week, and there's a part where it contrasts the mountains of Edom versus the mountains of Jerusalem. Ezekiel kind of doing another version of Obadiah, calling out the Edomites and how proud they are for living in these super high mountains, and as they judged Israel while they were going to exile, yet God talks about how their mountains will be destroyed, yet the mountains of Jerusalem and Zion will be the place that he chooses. So so I want to go back to the master's degree, because obviously you guys traveled around during the degree. You also probably got time to travel around, but specifically the degree you did, what type of classes did people take when they got the degree in Hebrew Bible and the ancient Near East? I know you took many, but just maybe list a few. Give us a snapshot of what that looked like. Yeah, no, it's a good question. Maybe some of your favorite ones. Yeah, definitely. So obviously, like I said, I sort of see it as a kind of a tripartite degree. You can do, you'll end up doing languages. You'll do text-based research, text-based classes, i.e. Hebrew Bible classes like on the Psalms, or classes on the priestly literature, or the other classes. Like I had one with Mordecai Kogan, for example, on Assyrian sources and the Book of Kings, for example, which was fantastic, right? I mean, such a lovely class. And then on a third level, archaeology, right? So because archaeology in and of itself is such a different, it's related obviously to the study of the Bible, but it's its own discipline altogether, right? And so I think those three areas are really at the core of what you can take in a Hebrew Bible and ancient Near East degree, and what I did. And you get exposure to each, and you can really say, okay, what area do I really love, and what area is really my passion? And unfortunately for me, I was like, well, all three are just wonderful. Why can't we just do all three? So, and
One of my favorite courses, of course, was Akkadian. So when you get there, you have to decide whether or not you're going to take the Akkadian track or the non-Akkadian track. That was the case when I was there. I don't know if that's still the case if they get it, if everyone takes it or not. So so we had Elnathan Weissert, a brilliant man, wonderful man, such a lovely soul, and we had his course twice a week for 3 hours. And it was wonderful, right? I mean, I look back on this time and with the friends that I had in that course, and it was just such a wonderful time with Elnathan and learning the Akkadian language. And I know many who've gone through the program, they always talk about Akkadian with Elnathan and how wonderful that is. And you know, I taught Akkadian here at ORU, and I had a student send me an email saying how much he loved that class, how fond he is, how fond of a memory it is when he's looking back on it just now. And he said, well, I just think it's the study of Akkadian. You know, I think this is just what happens when you study Akkadian. It really is this way. But no, Elnathan really made such a wonderful experience for all of us. And that class, I have to say, was my favorite. And it, as we've said before, I think when we had Noah Green, one of our former students, on, when you study Akkadian, it really opens up something else. Hard to explain, sort of like a window into the Near East, a window into the world of the Bible that you otherwise don't have access to. And so I was very thankful for that. So that's one of the classes. The other thing, the archaeology classes I really loved as well. So I think we had a class with Doron Ben-Ami, archaeologist in Israel. We got to dig in Jerusalem at one point and getting to understand through the digging how archaeology works, but also at the same time getting to understand how the research works in the library. Also very important for archaeology. I mean, it's classic Indiana Jones, right? I mean, as he says, most archaeology is done in a most archaeologists spend their time in a library, which is true, but no, they are also out in the field, and it's a lot of fun, hard work, but fun nonetheless. And going to Hatzor, I think one of the things that really piqued my interest at the time, or sort of really transformed my thinking on archaeology, was being up at Hatzor and Doron Ben-Ami turning to you sort of saw this large hill next to us where we were. We were in the temple complex. We could see this large hill. And he said, that's, you know, it's a tell, right? So a tell is layer upon layer of civilization that is built. So from the ancient of time, civilizations come and they build on top of the previous generations, right? And so what you end up getting is a mound of sorts, or what we call a tell. And then what archaeologists have to do is dig from the top down, right? And you're destroying each layer as you go, but you're uncovering the civilizations that have built on top of it. So for example, Jerusalem's a large tell, right? So Jerusalem's just been built, you know, from generation to generation, built upon the previous generation. And so if you dig down in Jerusalem, you can dig way down to get back to the early Bronze Age, and you're like, okay, this was a parking garage, and now we've uncovered it, and we see that the early Bronze Age was way down there. And this happens all over Israel. But up at Hatzor, you know, Doron Ben-Ami pointing out the tell was really transformative for me to just see it in the moment. Like, oh, yes, so there it is. It's a hill, and if we were to dig down that, we would see it. Also, to then look out the rest of the city of Hatzor, it's all farmland, and, you know, they're not probably ever going to excavate it, but the city's probably out there, right? And we've only uncovered just such a small part of it. And it makes us realize that there's a whole lot we don't know yet, right? That's still hidden from us of the past. So we've uncovered what we've uncovered, and we continue to do so. But there's always more to find on the archaeological level. So I have one more. We have one more thing to say, though. So then on the whole tripartite, so that's languages. Then you have archaeology, and then the text-based courses. Like I said, with Mordecai Kogan, absolutely love that. Such a wonderful time. But I think probably my favorite course was with Professor Baruch Schwartz on the priestly literature. Of course, he is the expert in this field. But to take his course and to get to hear from him and to see him in his real element in that course, it was such a wonderful thing. And it transformed the way I understood Leviticus, right? I mean, Leviticus really became one of my favorite texts of all time. still is to this day, just because of that course. During one of those classes, we got to spend one of his class periods in Jacob Milgram's home. Jacob Milgram had passed, so his widow's home. But we were we had a class there. Got to see Jacob Milgram study, and these are experiences you can't have anywhere else, right? I mean, you can only have them at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem. So, anyways, these are the types of classes and courses that you can take in the degree.
Such a holistic approach. I love, by the way, that it's a tripartite. That's so fitting for Hebrew Bible studies.
Yes, indeed. Right.
You have your Torah, prophets, and writings, your Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, and then you have your tripartite education to understand this tripartite canon.
That's right.
So
very good.
It's only fitting. So, yeah, just amazing experience. Akkadian, it's one of the most beautiful, impactful, yet also difficult languages that anyone could ever study.
Mm-hmm.
The scale, though, is huge. Hundreds of thousands of tablets that tell us so much about the ancient Near East. So that's awesome. Your tripartite approach, I think, could be really helpful for people, even those listening, saying, where have I been spending most of my time in? Maybe there's certain people that have been heavy in text, certain people heavy in archaeology, certain people heavy in language.
Yeah.
And that's fine, right? We all have our main interests.
Yeah, of course. Right.
But what I've found is my on-ramp to biblical studies was language, the language side.
Yeah.
And over time, I realized, okay, I want to beef up my area in text, because realizing ultimately that languages have their meaning because of the text they're in. And it's important that we understand the context and having the whole story, right? Not just isolating words and phrases. Yeah. And then because of you, right, I ended up learning, okay, I also need to add in the ancient Near East, the archaeology, and I guess ancient Near East is almost like a broader category because there's language, text, and archaeology within all of them.
Of course.
But realizing, hey, I don't want to just focus on Israel's languages and texts, but focus on the whole of ancient Near East languages and texts. Add in the archaeology. It just gives us a holistic grounding for how we approach things. And so, hey, good news for our listeners is we love covering all these topics, both ourselves and with our guests.
That's it.
So if you need a dose of good tripartite education, here you go. We have it for you.
Exactly. And of course, like I always say, well, I have one of my closest friends from Israel, whom I studied with. As I always say, he has this wonderful phrase where he says, anything past 586 BCE is just post interesting, right? So come and study the interesting period with all of us. So
that's good. That's good. I love it. Yeah. What was that story with one of your professors did someone ask, hey, had you ever studied Latin? You know what I'm talking about?
No. Yeah, what story was that? That's not coming to mind. Did they
I feel like there was one you told where one of your professors who had studied a lot of languages, and then he was asked
No, Septuagint.
Oh, Septuagint. Okay.
Was it a Septuagint study? Yes. I think it was dealing with the Septuagint because obviously, and this is a good question, because with the Hebrew Bible and in the ancient Near East, obviously you just get into the Masoretic text and you're studying it, because if you're going to get back into the Near East, Greek is not really the language you'd want to go through. You'd want to go through the Semitic languages so that you can compare it to the other Semitic languages. And of course, the Septuagint is very important. We know this on a text critical level, right? And everyone knows it. But I just had a professor that had said that he hadn't really touched the Septuagint since grad school, and for good reason. There was no need to for his particular study and area. So,
no offense for our fellow brothers and sisters who study Septuagint.
No, it's very important. No, I understand, but maybe we'll have to do another podcast on the Septuagint and the importance of it and what we're dealing with there. So,
we also need one on Leviticus. We had
Yitzhak Fader, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, such a good episode. Yeah, and there was a lot from obviously Baruch Schwartz's class and some of the research I did for him that I really wanted to ask Fader about more. So anyways, there's a lot with Leviticus that we need to talk about. So
we do.
Yeah.
So I'm curious on the teaching side of things, the teaching research. You got to be around people like Baruch Schwartz, El Natan.
Right.
By the way, fun fact, I forgot. I was thinking when you said El Natan, taught such a great course in Akkadian, and I thought about how it sounds like El Natan to you all. El, God, Natan gave. His name means God gave. God gave El Natan as a gift. He gave everyone a gift of Akkadian.
He did. Yes, indeed. So
something I'm curious about is there anything that you walked away from, not just the content they taught, but how they taught, not just their research, but how they researched, that, you've kind of incorporated or been influenced by any of the professors that you studied with when you were at Hebrew University of Jerusalem?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, they were all just experts in their field. I mean, they knew their stuff like none other, but they were so personable. And I think that was such a lovely part of the teaching, that there was a high regard for exceptional academics and research, but they were approachable professors. They were professors that really cared about their students. You could tell on one level. Baruch Schwartz, of course, we had some lovely time with him even outside the classroom. El Natan as well. Had a few meals with him. Natan Wasserman, the way that he would teach was really exceptional. It's nice too to see when you leave Hebrew, you're like, oh, these are really the top scholars in their areas. You start reading their publications, and even a recent find in Jerusalem, Natan Wasserman was being interviewed, and you're like, oh yeah, I had that professor. Remember this? And,
so cool.
Yeah, some of those sorts of things. And also the advice we would ask, because a lot of us, our intent was to go on to PhDs, to do postgraduate work and to teach. And so we would ask for advice on just teaching, right? And we would get that advice. We'd get that advice back. And I think that also being very important. I know that when I teach, I often think back on some of those professors, and I think, how were they doing this? I see how they were doing it. I took note of it, and I try to implement some of that into my own coursework. So I think on that level, it's very Jewish, very Israeli, right? It's taking students under your wing and really walking them through material and teaching it in a good and exceptional way. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Something else I'm curious about is the nature of a spectrum of specialization to generalization. So I think there's a need for every part of the spectrum. People who are studying one specific topic their whole life, and they just dig really deep in it. Generalization, people who can talk about just about everything, anything that comes up in a class, they have something to say. Yeah. And so we have people listening to this podcast who are all over on that spectrum. Yeah. Some people have a really niche interest. They dive deep into it. Other people, they've done a lot of study. What I'm curious for you is, I think there are many people in periphery fields that they, let's say, are a general Bible person or Bible and theology and Christianity. And maybe they've done a study on everything from the Hebrew Bible all the way through to modern Christianity and everything in between, covering Hebrew Bible, New Testament, church fathers, early church, modern applications for Christianity. And what type of experience does someone get when they say, you know what, I'm really just going to dig deep on Hebrew Bible and ancient Near East? What type of things do you get from choosing to specialize there that maybe the person who's generalizing isn't going to pick up on? And I'm not asking this question to be a comparison game thing.
No, I understand.
But I think there are people who they realize, hey, because I'm focusing more up top meta level on a lot of things, there are some details, there are some components that I'm not going to pick up on. So as someone who you've done that in your career, what type of things do you think people are interested in?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, when I started out here just at ORU, for example, my undergraduate years, I mean, I was really looking toward ministry mostly. I mean, that's where my heart was, preaching and teaching. And so going through theology, right? theology proper, you learn really quickly, okay, so all the great theologians of the church are they're just biblical scholars, right? I mean, that's all they're really doing. They're just talking and discussing the text. And so I thought, okay, well, I already have done Hebrew, very interested in the text, always have been interested in Bible. So jumping then into Bible here, Judaic-Christian Studies under, of course, Professor Brad Young at ORU. I know we've talked about this, but there, really trying to understand Jesus within Second Temple Judaism, and within that particular context, especially Rabbinic Judaism, very instructive, very important. But for all of that, you still have one component missing. The apostles and Jesus are all reading the Hebrew Bible. Of course, Jesus himself, claiming to be who he is that's going to mean something then when it comes to the ancient Near East, right? So then to specialize in Hebrew Bible in the ancient Near East was just a sort of the last component for me of that whole journey of my academic career. And it just unlocked everything. And I don't say that flippantly, right? Like, it really does just unlock the text, unlocks the New Testament. In my opinion, it unlocks a whole swath of probably medieval theology. I have a student who I'm discussing this a lot about. He's very interested in medieval theology. And I thought, well, let's have this discussion about the ancient Near East. I just taught a class here at ORU. It's more of a humanities course called Wisdom of the Ancient World, in which, as you know, I really hit hard on ancient Near Eastern wisdom traditions and philosophy, and moved up to the Greco-Roman era and just ended there, New Testament, Greco-Roman era. And it was amazing. It is amazing to see how much the Near East is actually influencing all of these later traditions. And we take it for granted in the Western world. I would say we're ignorant of it on many levels in the Western world.
Yeah.
But we take it for granted how much influence is coming through. And so what I would say is that, and there is somewhat of a pushback within the academy for those of us who do this sort of research. Like I worked under Professor Lena Sophia Thielmeyer in my PhD work, and apart from her brilliance and apart from her amazing publishing giftedness and all that she's written and all that she does, and from just being such a fantastic person, one thing that really led me to her was the fact that she had studied her first 2 degrees at the Hebrew University. So I knew that we would have that shared methodology that we had received from Hebrew U, and that was very important for me because to be able to specialize in the Near East and in the Hebrew Bible is so important for understanding it and interpreting it. I can't say it enough. Like what I like to say to my students, maybe I'll just say it here on the podcast, say this to my students, like, we have to be, obviously we're commanded to be people of love, right? People who can love the other. And in this case, I would bid our listeners that we need to love our ancient Near Eastern brethren, right? Our ancient Near Eastern ancestors enough to say, we need to learn about you. We need to learn about your cultures if we're going to be reading the Hebrew Bible and we're going to be trying to understand it. And as my dear friend who I was talking about from Hebrew University, who had that wonderful phrase about the post interesting, as he would always say to me, and still does in conversations at times, he'll say, well, just remember that the New Testament is still the ancient Near East, right? It is still very much part of that world and of that tradition. And
sure.
So anyways, to specialize in Hebrew Bible in the Near East, I know some people would think, why would you do it? And it's not a, you don't do it for money, that's for sure, right? I mean, that's not why you're doing it. But if you want to understand the text and you really want to understand where ancient Israel came from, you have no choice. You have to dive into it and specialize in it. Now, for our listeners, we're doing that to get it out there. It's not an easy road. It's not something that can just everybody can do, because it takes so much time, takes a lot of work to get into specialization. But for those who are interested in deeper study of the Bible, I would suggest that you find some of the tools that you need to really dive into that part of your understanding. If you have not. So
that's really good.
It's a long-winded response, but there it is. So
hey, it's good preaching.
There you go. Right. Yeah. Good.
It's
preaching.
Really good.
Amen. Good preaching. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're listening to this strikes a chord with you, you want to go deeper. reach out to us on social media. You can DM me on our social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. You can also post a comment in the YouTube video if that's where you're watching us, or you can send an email to Matthew@HebrewBibleInsights.com, and I can get that question to Dr. French here if you have any questions, because we want to encourage people. We want to help support you on this journey. We know what it's like to be passionate about this area. That it's such an important field that doesn't get enough attention, and it's so relevant for Christians to grow in. It really helps to have a holistic understanding of Scripture. Mm-hmm. So, and those of you that you've already chosen a different specialization, thanks for joining us. We hope this is a great resource to just add to your repertoire, and because we know we need other expertises too. And so thanks for joining us on this. I also wanted to ask you just a couple of just fun questions about stories that maybe you have from when you're in Israel. Maybe you took a fun trip, or you had a fun interaction, or anything. Do you have any of those stories?
Yeah, a lot of fun stories within Israel. Of course, the one story that matters, of course, is the hummus story, right? Like, so to eat Israeli hummus, there's nothing like it, right? And so I miss the hummus especially. We had a lot of hummus outings. I would just say getting to know the people. I really loved my kehillah, so I worshipped with some Messianic Jewish believers on a Saturday night on Shabbat Eve in Jerusalem, and it was a smaller group, and really loved that community of faith. I went on a few outings with the men, did a sort of a hiking rafting trip up north. And just such a lovely time. I really, really, really enjoyed that part of being in Israel. Of course, like I said, the Hebrew University with all of the faculty and the professors there, such lovely people, such wonderful care for their students. That's what I felt being in Israel when I was there. And they take it very seriously, and they really do want students coming to study there, and so you should.
So, like you, Israel ruined hummus for me in the best and worst way ever.
Yes, how so?
Because there's nothing like it in the States. When I go over there,
I know.
I'm like, I don't know what brown stuff I was eating in America, but it's not the same. Because like you go to Israel and there's just stores that all they sell is hummus. That's it.
I know.
You go there at a restaurant and you can just buy hummus and all different kinds, and even like meats that are inside of it. You get hummus as a main dish if you want. It was so good. And then I come back and I'm like, so sad.
Yes.
So look, hummus, it's still pretty healthy. So I eat what I can find, but I mean, I call it hummus, but I don't call it hummus, if you know what I mean. Like Israel, there's hummus, and here it's hummus.
It's hummus. It's good. I like that.
But seriously, the food in Israel is still healthy. I am
nice Mediterranean diet, all of it. Yeah,
Mediterranean diet's great.
So
absolutely love that. So that hummus, I totally relate to you. On that front.
So there was that. Let's see. Obviously, the friends, our trips to the beach in Tel Aviv. Where I said one of the greatest roads, if not the greatest road in Jerusalem, was the one to Tel Aviv to go to the beach. Right. So always, we love Jerusalem, but it's always nice to get out and to go enjoy other parts of Israel, and then to come back. And obviously, I got to know several other families. There was a Lebanese pastor friend of mine up in Haifa. He's Israeli. Wonderful story for his life and family, and really got to know him and his family, and really enjoyed worshiping with them, and spent a lot of time with them. And then, of course, in Bethlehem, there's a family there I'd spend a lot of time with as well. On the weekends, every now and then would head over and spend time. So that was times that I cherish in my memory and still keep in touch with those families. And of course, like I said, some of my best friends coming out of my time at Hebrew U. It just felt like one of those moments, like we talked a Sha'ah Elohit, right? A time, a divine time with those friends that I made, lifelong friends, and still colleagues in the field with many of them. But I have to say, the best thing that happened, the best experience that I had was I got engaged when I was in Israel.
Hey, there you go. Hey, you need to tell the story about how you got the ring there and everything. Right. Like, this is great.
So my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, she was in Denver. She's from Denver, so she was working on her second master's degree in clinical psychology and counseling at Denver Seminary, and she came for a visit. What was it? End of 2010. So she was going to come for the new year, and of course I was going to propose, but I couldn't really afford to buy jewelry in Israel, so I had to buy the ring in the States. So I bought the ring online. I got it ordered, and had to devise a plan to get this ring to Israel. Couldn't ship it, right? That wasn't an option.
Yeah, right.
So I had to figure out how to get it here so that I could propose. And so I worked with my mother, and we devised a plan where she stuck the ring up, so the international Apple Mac plugs, right? I still am an Apple fanboy, right?
Yeah.
So, so my mother cut out part of the cardboard in this Apple Mac box plugs, and was able to stick the ring in there and then tape it all back up and then close it again to look as if it hadn't been opened. And she, of course, wrapped it and sent it to my girlfriend. And she, of course, thought that, well, the Israelis aren't going to probably allow a wrapped gift in a bag. So she unwrapped it, saw it was just these Mac plugs, and this would be a Christmas gift for me. So anyways, made it into the luggage. And then, of course, when she left Denver, huge snowstorm hits the East Coast, right? So they're just shutting down airports everywhere. But the one airport that she was going through was the only one that did not get shut down. She was the last flight to get out. So she made it to Tel Aviv, made it with the ring, gave me that as the gift. And so I was able to get the ring out, and then proposed on New Year's Day up on Har Arbel, Mount Arbel, right? A famous hiking place right there in Israel. And so we were down near the Galilee. We saw Capernaum, and then I took her up to that cliffside. And it was great. It just rained, so it was really a beautiful area. And then when we got up there were some people, and then people just dissipated. There wasn't anyone there, and I was able to then propose. And she said yes. And yes, and we are
amazing.
Yes, it was fun. We went down and had a nice meal on the Sea of Galilee after that moment, and then drove back to Jerusalem. So
how romantic. Maybe those listening, maybe you too can find love in the land of Israel.
That's right, and get engaged, right?
You can have reason to read the Song of Songs in Hebrew at the Sea of Galilee while you eat a meal together.
Yes, indeed.
That's a perfect story to end on. How epic. How great. Yeah, your wife's amazing too. She and I love getting to be with you guys. And
it's incredible. Yeah. And
I love that you guys are doctors French.
She was. I was going to say, she works here at Israel. She works here at ORU as well in the counseling department, the grad department. So, we have two boys, Ezra and Boaz. So we took those Hebrew names and said, we're going to run with us. So
Shannon might be following in your path. Shannon's a doctor. Like the real kind, the ones who help people with medical problems. And if I get my PhD, we can be Doctors Delaney and
there you go.
Doctors French.
And Doctors French.
How fun.
We'll go on a trip.
Well, thank you for sharing stories about your journey. I think people will find this very entertaining and also valuable. And if people like this episode, I think we should do one about what it was like for you getting your PhD in the UK.
Yes, would love to talk
that
about
whole experience. So I think that would be fantastic. I think to get a really in-depth feel of what's the difference between a master's degree and a PhD,
absolutely,
the type of work you do, I think it'd be great. So we'll probably have to do that in the future.
Let's do it.
So to all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us in our conversation today, and we'll see you in the next one.